to this Liverpool Professionals Power Panel event. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about some issues that we know will be affecting business. I should tell you this is being recorded, so if you say anything that you think you shouldn't and you want us to edit it afterwards, we're quite happy to do that, but I'm sure that none of you will be saying anything untoward today. And we've got some eminent solicitors who will be able to guide us on that anyway. So we've got three people who are going to contribute in terms of some of the issues that we think might be, as I say, impacting on business.
There's that connection he was talking about.
That's the connection.
It's the quietest I've ever seen Frank, to be honest with you. I like that, Frank. That's a nice look.
Oh no.
Oh, he's gone.
Dial back in again.
Joys of technology. We'll blame you, Victoria, because you're both on the call.
I think I've stole the bandwidth.
Give him a shout downstairs, tell him he's gone off.
We'll have to share a screen, won't we?
So as I was saying, we've got some people who are going to be talking about issues that are impacting on business, and then we'll move into a discussion about the Liverpool recovery plan. Bill and I have been sat on business leaders group talking with city leaders about that plan, and that is on its way to government now, so we can talk through some of the issues that are going to be raised with government who are looking for funding for. And I know a couple of people on the call today, Denise and Keith certainly, who joined us for a conversation with Mike Hemrick, who has been leading those discussions for that recovery plan for the city. So I'm going to start, if I may, with Victoria Brown, who is a HR specialist from High Performance Consultancy. One of the key issues, of course, that we've all been trying to get our heads around in recent weeks has been this new word that I didn't know existed called furloughing. And there have been additional changes, and I know from the emails that I've been getting, people are still a little bit confused and concerned about what might be the new situation as far as that's concerned. So good afternoon, Vic.
Hi, Frank. Sorry, I think I lost you for a little bit then. So whatever I hope you haven't asked me a question, I didn't hear it.
I think everybody lost me. I think I came off inadvertently. So let's just talk about the furloughing situation and what those new changes mean to businesses from the 1st of July then.
Okay. So I'm glad you've got the call today, actually, because the HMRC provided further clarity on this on Friday, which really helped. So we've got the changes now that have been introduced. It's called a flexible furlough now. Long overdue, in my opinion. I think we should have had this option very early on. What's great about it is now you have got the ability to have people that are on furlough, but also bring them back into the business part-time. So to give you an example, if you had somebody say that can everyone still hear me? Because I'm sort of froze.
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I'll just carry on then. That's what normally happens in our household. So you would say you'd work say for 2 days, for example, if you did a 5-day week, and then the other 3 days you would be furloughed at the 80% or 100% if you top up their wage. What you can do, I mean, what is interesting about it, and we talked about this to our clients last week, is that the 10th of June was the deadline. So if you hadn't furloughed somebody, that was the last date that you could come on to the. Obviously now the intention is for the government to try and slowly bring us out of the furlough scheme by the end of October. So I think there was some people, obviously it talked about the end of the month. You needed to have 3 consecutive weeks of furlough. People before that date that's fine. You can still bring them back into the furlough scheme from the 1st of July, so you have got that flexibility. But if you hadn't furloughed them before the 10th of June, then you're not able to now. That date has passed. There's more flexibility now as well in terms of how many weeks. So beforehand, you had to furlough somebody for a minimum of 3 weeks to be eligible. Now you can literally furlough them for an hour if you wanted to. However, they are becoming stricter in terms of they haven't got any sort of, if you furlough somebody for 1 day, they don't want 30 days worth of different claims. So you've got to at least provide a week of a claim for an employee. And then we've also we're aware now that we are, as employers, are going to have to start to make contributions. So it's fine for July. In August, we need to start to pay our tax contributions, and then in September it will we still have to pay our NI and tax contributions, but then we also have to make a further 10% contribution. So the furlough scheme will provide 70% of the contribution, and then in October it's a further 20% contribution. So it'll be 20% that we have to contribute, and the tax and NI, which you know, for a lot of my clients that are in the hospitality sort of sector, that has raised, as you can imagine, some real concerns if they're not really sure on what sort of it looks like for them in terms of their opening yet.
Okay, thanks, Vic. It was a little bit of cracking up a little bit in the middle of that. So if people need further clarification on any of the points that Victoria's made, we will do a rundown at the end, and we can go back and ask some questions if that's okay.
No problem.
Yeah, let me just turn to Denise then, Denise Walker. Nice to see you, Denise.
Good to see you.
And I know that you were in the discussion about the recovery plan, as I mentioned earlier, but just in terms of the issues that you're being approached with by your clients at Glenville Walker, what are the sort of issues that are being raised with you where they're seeking your advice, Denise?
Clients yet haven't started to get into the area where they're feeling that their businesses are in trouble, or actively seeking advice in relation to their businesses being in trouble. And I do think that there will be a period in the next phase where that will become increasingly the pattern. But up to now, they're getting into contract disputes, and a lot of contract disputes, and people are wanting to get out of contracts, and people are wanting to enforce contracts against one another. So there's a load of commercial disputes going on at the moment, and it's a bit like the Wild West. And I read an article in the Gazette the other day that said effectively that's happening all over the place. So, you know, there's a lot of semi-litigious work at the moment. So because I'm not a litigator, I'm wandering into the areas of, I mean, I'm a contract lawyer, so I'm constantly looking at contracts and drafting contracts. So they're asking for your advice on how can we get out of this? How can we change that? Does that affect us anymore? It's really interesting because it's different thinking. You know, you don't normally get so many challenges going on.
And do you think that's going to just increase over the next few months, Denise? Is that going to be an area you think that's going to be focused on?
Yeah, it definitely will increase over the next months. And there's a lot of people bringing or trying to bring claims against their insurers for, you know, lack of support and, you know, should I be covered for a pandemic and business interruption and all of that kind of thing. And there's two trains of thought on that. You know, did insurers ever really intend to cover pandemics and whatever? But yeah, I think there will be a lot more of this work probably for the next 4 to 6 months, maybe. And I think after that, or increasingly from now on, as people come out of mothballing, as I call it, the businesses will find, though some businesses have flown in this period, other businesses, you know, of course, like hospitality and whatever, can't operate fully or properly or even at all. But as they come out, and even shops and things, they will find, you know, either they're viable profitability-wise or not. And that's where Jason and you know, I do both corporate and insolvency, so that's when we'll get busier on looking at restructuring or you know, sadly, insolvency.
Are there any particular sectors, Denise, that you've been approached by?
The sectors that we've been doing a lot of work for, there's quite a few guys out there who do restructuring and rescue of businesses. So we've done quite a bit of technology stuff in relation to businesses that have, you know, maybe been digital marketing agencies or whatever, where their clients have stopped using them, but they've got basically good and viable businesses. And there have been people sort of mopping up groups of those types of businesses and building a larger business on that basis. So we've done quite a lot in that side of things. Hospitality, of course, is just gone at the moment, and nobody really knows where that's going. It's going to be the latest out. And, you know, things like online businesses that are suppliers of goods and equipment and things like payment arrangements, banking, financial businesses, they're doing quite well at the moment. So those types of entities, really.
Okay. Thanks, Denise. Again, we'll come back to you later and bring you in other points. I'm sure there'll be some questions around what you've said as well. Keith Tully now, I'll bring into the conversation. Keith from Begbies Traynor, good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you, Frank.
Yeah, and I think you've got one of your colleagues with you today as well, Jason.
Hi,
so
yeah.
Nice to see you, Jason. So I'll fire a couple of questions at you, and whichever one feels more able to take it, then feel free. But obviously, we are going to see some businesses that are being challenged at the moment, and as furlough starts to come to an end, some of the issues that Victoria and Denise have already raised will become more apparent. What should businesses be thinking about right now, guys, if they do feel as though they're in a bit of trouble, even if they've had, you know, the loans that are available to them? They may have had great relief, but they will be doing projections, and I'm guessing within the next month or so, there's a lot of companies and business owners who are going to sadly be sitting down and deciding, actually, it's time for us to close the doors. What's the sort of advice that you're giving people like that at the moment, Keith?
Yeah, I mean, most of the stuff that we're doing at the moment, Frank, we're doing a lot of business reviews, you know, looking at owners of businesses that come into us, asking us to give them, you know, an impartial view on the solvency of their business, to look at, you know, where they're actually standing at this moment in time, what the loans that they've obtained, the grants, etc., mean to them moving forward. And rather than actually entering into any formal or panicking and going into any formal insolvency processes, it's a case of doing a lot of, you know, work reviewing those businesses. Like you say, I think that it's sort of hitting home to some businesses now. Obviously, it's great to see the economy starting up again. You know, the high street opening on Monday, I think it was, is great. Even though I wasn't one of the hundreds of people queuing up outside of Primark, I think my alarm clock didn't go off on time for that, but I'm sure my wife probably was. But yeah, it's lovely to see. But I think the reality is, once people start getting back to some form of normality, just real hard decisions have to be made about business and the viability of businesses. And obviously, Jason and I, you know, we're available to talk to local business owners, to give them some sort of reassurance, to tell them the options, to warn them about pitfalls, you know, telling them what other businesses are encountering at this moment in time. And hopefully, you know, if they seek the advice early, there's ways of saving businesses, and also, if you can't save businesses, coming up with solutions and plans so that those businesses have moving forward, there's employment, people's employment can be protected. So yeah, the main thing I would say and stress in all of this is speak to people like ourselves as early as you possibly can, just to, you know, chew the fat and understand what the options are out there for you.
And one of the other points that has been raised by a few people now who are facing that dilemma, Keith, either you or Jason, obviously, to answer this, but where CBILS loans have been taken out, obviously they were announced with a bit of a fanfare from the government, suggesting that that was money without any sort of personal impact to directors. So if a director has taken a loan of £20,000, let's say, and they're looking at that now and thinking, actually, it's going to be really difficult for me to pay this back, what liabilities do those guys have?
I think I'll answer that, Keith, if you're happy for me to. They obviously, on the face of it, they haven't got any personal liability to it on application for that loan. But obviously, the key is what you do with that money once you've got it. Looking into where you've spent it and making it work for you, not rushing into spending it, trying to plan, making it go as far as you can, because there's not just today, there's next week, there's next month that you've got to plan for. So as far as personal liability, even though wrongful trading is being relaxed, and there's plenty of other things, you could create preferences by paying the wrong people. So it's important, again, before, if you've got any concerns, is following Keith's advice, is to come and speak to people, get advice about what you should and shouldn't be doing, because that helps mitigate potential problems down the line if things don't quite work out. And I'm sure Denise would probably agree with me on that there's plenty of pitfalls out there for directors that don't quite get it right.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the issues, isn't it, at the moment? There's an awful lot of policies being issued by the government, and it seems to be a bit of a movable feast, and it's difficult for businesses to keep track of them. But I do think some of this laissez-faire attitude around those loans that has been allowed to increase really amongst the business community, we need to treat that with a little degree of suspicion, don't we? Because, as you say, Jason, there will be ways in which the banks, those people that have lent the money, will still be looking at you as an individual to see if, as you rightly say, that money is being utilised properly.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's something as simple as not receiving the furlough money and not passing it on to the employees. Something as simple as that, he's going to cause them problems. I had a gentleman on the phone yesterday who was in that position, asking me whether we should pay the wages or not. And I said, obviously, I can't advise you to yes or no, but I can give you the options. And when we went through the options and he advised me that it was furlough money, then I said, well, I think you've got no option, because what I've read recently is that could be, and it's a strong word, is fraudulent.
Yeah.
So the simple things can catch people out.
I've not even thought of that. But never mind. I'm sure it's not too late. Just before I go into to ask Bill about the Liverpool recovery plan, there was one other issue, Victoria, I wanted to raise with you, because people are now starting to return to the offices and to work. So, what are the sort of things that we need to be putting in place in our offices to ensure that we're applying the right health and safety standards? Oh. Did you hear me then, Vic?
No, sorry, what did you say?
Oh, shall I just shout?
Yeah.
I was just saying, as people are returning to offices now, are there any things that we need to be doing as businesses to ensure that that environment is different, safer? What are the sort of things that we should be putting in place to ensure that we're abiding by the new laws and regulations the government have introduced?
Well, the answer is yes, you absolutely need to make quite a few changes to the office. We've actually opened up our Liverpool office now. The reason being not to sort of it's voluntary for people to attend the office if they want to, but we did have some genuine concerns around mental health for some of the people that work within the business. So I can obviously talk you through it from a practical perspective as well, because I've actually done it myself now. It's important, the 2-meter rule is important to consider. So one of the things that we did was take out some of the desks. We have a rota so that you're only allowed so many people. So we have small numbers that are in at any one time. Because I think what you have to consider is not just the desks and that situation of the desks, but also things like your toilet facilities, your kitchen facilities. Realistically, I mean, for us and the size of our kitchen, we can only have one sort of person in that space at any one time. So even if from a desk perspective, you may have the ability to have more more sort of desks in, just consider those communal areas as well, because you know, you can't have people queuing up to make their lunch, can you, for a significant amount of time. And obviously all the sort of the hygiene requirements are there that were there sort of just before the lockdown. You have to have a risk assessment, and there's a 20-step guide that we've pulled together, so anybody that's on the call hasn't had it, I'm happy to share with Helen, that can sort of share that with everybody. It's just quite a good practical step for you to consider, because there's lots of things that you wouldn't have considered, one of which is obviously the people that are vulnerable. So I think a lot of the time you will think of the people that are maybe pregnant in your business or of a certain age, but sometimes you maybe don't know the circumstances of people. You know, you may not know that somebody's got somebody that's at high risk that they live with. So it's important for you to sort of work through that with your team and identify anybody that is sort of in that high risk category, because they're not going to be able to come into the office. You have to do a re-induction as well, so I think that's important, and that's come up on quite a few of my calls recently, where people sort of are asking the responsibilities that they have as employers, and I really would urge people to make sure that they do that re-induction before people enter back into the building. You give them the guidance and support and explain the risk assessment and what they've got to do. And also, if you're in shared sort of space and you've got, you know, a landlord, then you need their risk assessment as well, and that needs to be shared with your team so they understand. For us, say, you know, we've got a foyer, we have shared toilets, so we need to understand what the expectations are from our landlord and what they've put in place for us as well. So again, you know, I'd do that induction, and I'd also make sure that you do have some sort of signed declarations from your team to say that they've read it. You know, they haven't got high temperature or any concerns, or, you know, of any conditions. Also, they know what to do if they do get a high temperature, and they know how to conduct themselves in the workplace.
Okay, thanks, Vic. And just want to get into the discussion now in terms of maybe a bit more positivity, because all of these things are sounding very challenging for business, and we are all trying to face up to this new future with some optimism. And Bill, as I mentioned, you've been sat on the Liverpool Cobra Business Leaders Group. It's been some fascinating discussions. I think it's done a great job, actually. But tell us about some of the key points that were taken forward to government, and how we're hoping that we can begin to come out of this thing as strong as we possibly can as a city.
I'll mute myself, which is the most important thing. I'm actually slowly getting there. I've only been on this thing for about 3 months, haven't we? As I said right at the beginning of this, before this started, I used to think Zoom was an ice lolly. So, yeah. We have been meeting on a daily basis, actually, right at the beginning of this, since St. Patrick's Day. So it's 13 weeks today.
Okay.
Incredible where that time's gone, isn't it? But a lot has happened, and a lot still needs to happen. Just picking up on some of the positive news, just to say that yesterday, as we know, retail reopened in the city centre, which was great to see. Queues at places like Primark. And actually, just as an aside, the queue was longer at Zara than Primark. But the problem with the queue at Zara, everybody was taking stuff back. Primark actually sold things yesterday. And that's the difference about having an online business as opposed to a high street business that doesn't. Primark doesn't have any online presence. But it's good to see it. But let's not be lulled into some false source of optimism, because retail came back yesterday, and it was great to see some of the stats around footfall. Yesterday, that footfall was 125% higher in Church Street than it was the week before. But still running at 60% below our normal levels of footfall. And that's the key to it. So people are coming back, but people are coming back cautiously. And there is still a lot of uncertainty, a lot of reluctance to come back into the city. And that will only hopefully improve over time as we maintain this sort of levels of contact, maintaining 2 meters distance, which is always a bit difficult in a fluid high street, but also as those businesses start to open back up again. I heard today that John Lewis is opening up within about 10 days, which is good news. Yeah. So hopefully that's not for general publication. Of course, everything we say here is just for between us, isn't it? But anyway, it'd be good to see John Lewis back in early July. But the key to us now is getting the rest of the city reopened, and particularly our hospitality sector, which, as we've talked about incessantly on the calls, has been decimated and is in danger of being decimated, particularly some of the moves that the Vic was talking about with furloughing. Furloughing, we know, has been a major, it's been an essential, absolute lifeline to businesses. And when you look at the numbers of people that are furloughed at this moment in time, and if anybody has done that locally, it's just incredible the amount of furlough money that has flowed from the economy, and the fact that the government did it very quickly. We need to continue to remember that. But also the other impact for businesses is that they are, in the retail, hospitality and leisure sector, they're not paying business rates at this moment in time. And, you know, that just happened right at the beginning of this. And I often think that that's been a bit downplayed, that people say, oh, well, nobody's done anything for, the government aren't doing enough for business, but just removing the business rate liability. Can I tell you, for a business like Marks and Spencer's just in Liverpool, that's £1.2 million in business rates liability. Significant. The rateable value of the businesses within just the bid areas in the commercial district and the retail and leisure district, the rateable values are just slightly under 50 million. So if you think the business rate in the pound at the moment is about 51p, that's £25 million in business rates that businesses aren't paying, but government is paying. So we as taxpayers will continue to pay that for some time to come. So that's what we need to get open, and we need to get retail, hospitality and leisure open. And part of the work that the recovery plan, because that's what you asked the question about, not a general catch-up, but the recovery plan includes Liverpool Without Walls, which is a major element within it. And that's the ability of our restaurants, our hospitality, cafes, I'm not even thinking about pubs and events at the moment, because that's a few months down. But those restaurants and cafes to come out onto the streets. And part of that work is working at pace at the moment. It'll be an announcement this week. And you will see Bold Street, closed. You'll see Castle Street being closed between 11 in the morning and midnight, particularly the section that you see behind me between the junction with Dale Street and Cook Street will be closed, so that those businesses can come onto the paved areas, so Geno's can expand. So all those areas, restaurants that have pavement cafes can expand, so we can start using those businesses and start using those restaurants. But you know, the one marked thing I noticed yesterday, and this is whereas professional sector needs a lot of support, is that High Street was busy, but I'm saying it was 60% down on normal occupation levels. You walked up Lord Street and turned into Castle Street, and it's a ghost town in the commercial district. And from the conversations I'm having, and I'm sure all the people on this call will echo that, is professional businesses aren't talking about getting back to a full roster of staff much before September. And even after that, there's still concerns that won't be happening for some time. So the other elements of the city recovery plan, which are coming to the fore, are clearly, it's about getting some of the key developments underway. So there'll be an announcement, and obviously even you and I, Frank, aren't included in all of this, around Pall Mall and more commercial space opening up in Pall Mall, around the Knowledge Quarter and Upper Central, and other of the development sites in the city being fast-tracked forward. And that's what a lot of the recovery plan is about that. Linked within that is also about destination marketing and business tourism and subvention, because we need to get our arena and convention centre operating. And again, that will only come into being in the second quarter of next year is what the arena and convention centre are talking about, when we can start having some events. And we won't mention football, but getting fans in the stadium is an important element of our city. and not just the visitor economy, but for the health of our cities, to get fans back in, because those fans, particularly the red side of the city, fly in and stay in hotels, and that's very important for the visitor economy. Obviously, and it's key to we do that. So the recovery plan, and I've talked far too long. Hopefully some of that was useful, but recovery plan is with government. It's that government are being asked to provide Liverpool with a significant chunk of cash, but it's cash that will be returned very quickly in the amount of taxes that we'll be paying and the amount of jobs that will be created, because that's the underlying element within this. Because if we don't get our economy moving quickly now and get some key decisions, and would you believe the restaurants are supposed to be opening in 2 weeks' time? They still haven't had confirmation that that can happen. It's absolutely ludicrous.
I think that's, yeah, that's right. Thanks, Bill. And
yeah. Anyway, happy to answer any questions or anything else you've got in there, really. That's just a summary of where we're up to, I think.
Cheers, mate. And I think the other thing just to point out is that obviously the hospitality sector is massive throughout the UK, but in Liverpool, business rates at 49.9% of them come from our hospitality sector. So you can imagine the impact that it's having on the local authorities' coffers, if nothing else, never mind the impact it then has on the wider society and community. I think the other point I'd make in respect of the points that Bill's indicated there is that the ask of government, our recovery plan, I think, is the first one that's gone in. So we're ahead of the game as far as that's concerned. It's something that is being backed by the combined authority as well, which is great. So they're behind it. I think the only concern that we might have is that some politics might be getting played in the corridors of Whitehall, and of course Liverpool is not necessarily going to be their priority for a Conservative government, but hopefully we can overcome that, because those items that we have put forward do demonstrate and evidence the fact that they'll get a good return on that investment. I don't know if you've seen the unemployment figures that have been announced today, but again, there's been a massive spike in this part of the world. So it is something that we desperately need to be cracking on with. This just before I get into the general conversation, a couple of questions that people have put onto the group chat there. But I'm not sure if anybody can pick this up. Keith or Jason may be able to help. We have had a lot of relaxation around tax. The HMRC have not been collecting VAT, national insurance contributions, of course. At some point, is that going to be something that we are going to be liable to pay? Or is that a holiday and we can forget about it? What's the answer to that question, guys, if you know?
I think it's going to have to be paid at some point, isn't it? It's like all, if we refer to it all as pan debt, you know, it's all built up as one thing, and at some point it's going to need paying. The loans are going to need repaying at some point next year. The rates may come back online at some point. Certainly HMRC have deferred some till next year. But it depends what the economy looks like by then. They may defer it a little more, but at some point we are going to have to go into recovery mode, aren't we? We've got to pay for public services and things like that. So it will need repaying at some point.
Yeah, I just think, can I just add on that? I think that it'll be difficult for HMRC, to enforce this, because there'll be that many businesses that are in the same boat probably, and for them to pursue them for monies, and it'll be in a position where if they do that, the perception that will create out there, and who they're going for and who they're not going for. So it's going to be very hard to actually get back to the status quo. I think there'll be a lot of arrangements being made with HMRC, a lot longer than what previously you would have got, time wise with them.
Yeah, I think with the financial crisis, Keith, I think in 2008, they did defer a lot. They are there to be contacted and to be spoken to, and hopefully they will be sympathetic to the position of a lot of businesses and will work with them. But obviously, if any businesses are struggling, then there's people like ourselves out there that can add to that, and hopefully our advice can then hopefully secure a time to pay arrangement, or things like company voluntary arrangements and things like that. If businesses really are struggling to make ends meet, and just there's a good business there, it just needs some help to get it from where it is and back on its feet, and hopefully into a better position on the other side of that. It might mean some debt forgiveness, it might need some time to pay, but we were certainly there to look at anything and everything and help where we can.
Yeah, okay, thanks guys. Dawn, I know you had a question to ask. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, it was around the force majeure in contracts. We, on one side of my business, we have a training side, and we are going to be closing that side of the business. But this, I believe, is relevant to a lot of other training businesses out there as well at the moment, because they can't claim any ESFA funding or other funding. And in the contracts is the force majeure clause. And I just wanted to ask, from a legal side of things, is that being played? Can it be used in a cancellation of a contract? Because is COVID deemed as a force majeure?
Okay, shall I pick that one up?
Yeah, please, Denise.
Okay. Force majeure under English law is different to European law, because in Europe there are civil codes that decree what force majeure is. So your contract that has a force majeure clause in it, that clause, you need to read it carefully, because the clause itself will contain detail of the events that could be considered to be force majeure. And if they're not listed in that contract, you're in a difficult position if you want to claim force majeure. And force majeure is, where somebody wants to rely on a non-performance of their own, circumstances that explain their own non-performance in a contract. So you need to look carefully at the wording in the clause, and you need to use that wording, if you can, to justify your position. And COVID would be a force majeure event in certain circumstances, but not all. So for example, if you said, we can't deliver products on time, we can't deliver these products because all our staff are off ill, that wouldn't necessarily be a force majeure, because you could be told, well, you should have got staff elsewhere, you should have spent more money delivering, you should have got around it. Well, some contracts will have pandemics. Well, pandemic is maybe a relatively newer word. Some contracts will cover that, but the large majority of contracts don't, because nobody ever envisaged that things would get this bad. But if you want to say, I can't perform this contract, you need to look at the context of the clause and see if you can use anything to help yourself, and see if there's any direct relationship between what's happened to you and COVID that you can draw a line through and say, that's why I can't do it. I don't know if that helps you at all.
It does. Thank you for that. I think I raised the point is I do have a solicitor that we're working closely with at the moment looking at that. But I raised the point more because there could be other businesses out there looking, thinking we've got a clause, but actually they may not be able to use it. Yeah. I think we can in R1, so fortunately I think we can.
Good.
But I'm not sure if other people can.
It'll be case by case basis.
Yeah. Julie, I know you had a question for Victoria.
Hi guys, yes I did. It was about obviously you talked about furlough and this part-time etc, but what about somebody, you mentioned the 10th of June of the cut-off date. What about somebody that's on maternity at the moment, so due to go back in August normally, and presumably they've not been put onto this on the 10th of June because they're still on maternity? How does that work?
So they have actually been more flexible in that regard. So anybody that's got some family-related reason, so maternity being perfect, paternity, parental leave, and they haven't been furloughed yet, you will be able to be furloughed. So you can come back as long, between now and October, you'd be able to be furloughed.
Right, okay, that's fine. Yeah, there's just a couple of people that I know that are on maternity at the moment, and we've all been talking about it and thinking, how on earth does this work? Because nobody obviously seems to know.
No. Yeah, well, HMRC provided the guidance on Friday, so it's in black and white now, so don't worry, you'll be able to be furloughed.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And can I just pick up on the point that Bill made earlier in respect of professional services, because few people obviously on the call, and Julie's been surprisingly quiet up until this point, Julie knows. And I just wanted to really ask you and Denise, you know, there will be some parts of the law that are going to be busy at the moment. I know Pauline McNamara's never been busier. She's a family lawyer, of course. So they've had lots of issues to deal with, and I'm sure there's more to come. So Julie, what do you think, generally speaking, in terms of the solicitor's profession and wider professional services, really?
Just been having this debate with somebody else. It's and agree. Denise sort of summed it up. Lots of, I won't repeat, lots of contract disputes. Our litigators are busy. Property has gone really quiet. I don't know about you, Denise, but people who were in the process of signing things are either just not prepared to take the risk, or they're waiting for the market to change. I think they want to, you know, they think they can do better deals. I think a lot of people, strangely enough, a lot of people in professional services that I've spoken to, whether it be lawyers or accountants, whatever, are now saying they do think they won't need these big offices that they've got. A lot of people are looking at maybe changing the way they work permanently, because they now realise that they can be productive and they can do it. So that's going on. There are, you know, there's lots of negative stories about there with all the clients, with all their challenges. Particularly interested, Jason, in what you're saying about the, you know, what people are doing with this money. It worries me. You know, they're sort of like, yeah, hey, I'm going to apply for that even if I don't need it. Then I'm going to do this, and that's going to catch up with them at some stage. That worries me for a lot of them. And but there are also positive stories for adaptable clients. I think adaptable is the key word. You know, people who are making engineering. We've got a few engineering clients who have adapted to making PPE and this, you know, the safety equipment, and they're doing really well and have been busy. Supply chains are difficult. People contracting with the NHS having problems. It's hard to predict. I think it will change the way we work, though. I don't know what Denise's thoughts are on that, but I do think from the professions and just going into the city centre and all of that, I think we, you know, our clients are now happy with seeing us in this environment and knowing that we're doing what we do. So it's unpredictable.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how much of this is going to become the new normal going forward. Now, I'll bring James in a second, because I think there's probably a slightly different perspective from creative agencies. But Denise, what's your feeling? Because you got great offices down there in Brunswick.
I think it'll help us grow without having to get bigger office space. I think that people will work more from home, or, you know, 70 days in, 70 days away. And we've got one young lawyer who lives around Manchester, and so she was doing a terrible trek to get through. But we now realise that she can do her job quite effectively with some days at home. For me, though, I am pushing to go back to work, because I don't know, I live on my instincts, and my instinct about a week ago was we need to get back into the office. We've been at home since the 17th of March, and it's worked perfectly, and all the technology and everything, because we were a youngish business, so we had all the new technology. But I think it is slightly harder to work, especially when you're doing transactional work and you've got to talk to all your counterparts and you've got to phone them up every time or go on Skype, and you're trying to compare documents and talk to people, and you can't do it as easily. It takes you longer. So my gut reaction was, I think that some of our business clients would like to see us back in. And I had heard what Bill had heard, which is September, October onwards. And we were actually talking about August, and what we've done is we've brought it forward. So we're going to be in early July, because I just don't want to end up in a situation where, and you know, we are busy. I don't want to end up in a situation where we almost get forgotten about. I think you have to have some office presence, but I agree with Julie that it will change for a lot of large law firms. I'm pretty sure it'll change for them.
Thank you. Thanks, Denise. James, as I say, I think maybe a slightly different perspective from the likes of Agent, because one of the great things of being a creative agency is getting people together and throwing ideas in a hat and so on. I don't know how hard you found that as a group of people, but certainly in my business as well. You know, that's something that we like to do, get people in a room and get people throwing ideas at each other. It seems to me that that's easier when you're face to face than it is on a Zoom call.
Yeah, and I think in our industry, in our case, everything we do is collaborate, revolves around collaboration with the clients, and it is getting around a table and writing things on the wall and stuff like that, and putting clients on the spot. It's definitely not as easy over Zoom. It's also the other things in the office, like walking past someone's screen, going, "Oh, I don't think that works," and they won't like that, and doing stuff like that, or overhearing something and say, especially me being out and about or speaking to people, if I overhear something in the office, I go, "Oh no, I've got an update on that. I heard it last week." So in terms of working from home, again, we did the same. It was the 16th of March we were working from home, and it was, you know, seamless. Well, the server was working, and the client work wasn't halted at all. But it's the communication, the culture of Agent that makes us work better. So although working from home has been successful, it's definitely not going to be normal for us. I think for me, like in bids and stuff like that, I probably will ask to work from home more often. Now we've got the full suite on the server and access to all the files. But again, it's that going over to someone's desk going, "Remember this project? What was the results? Can you show us the report?" rather than having a 20-minute Zoom call. So I definitely think, and externally, we have a lot of our clients who are in Liverpool. So those pain in the arse meetings to, you know, take a full day for an hour and a half meeting, I think those will be, you know, some of them will definitely be over Zoom now, and it'll help us deliver projects more effectively. But again, like the brands and the websites and the generation of ideas, that'll always be face to face.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a bit of a mixed bag, isn't it? And I think, as Denise has indicated there early, it's going to be interesting to see as businesses grow, whether they simply adopt a more flexible office working arrangement and rota, rather than going and getting bigger and bigger offices as we go forward. And of course, that's going to impact on the city in terms of its rate. And then, of course, you know, getting footfall in, which is so important to those hospitality businesses that we've talked about earlier. The other thing I just wanted to touch on, because it's been a cause of much discussion and debate within the business leaders group, as well as transport and how people get about. And my view of this, which you can happily disagree with if you wish, is that in the middle of a pandemic, when lots of people are furloughed, and we've also had a fantastic period of weather, then the idea of people getting on bikes is quite a positive one. And you can imagine the city being full of cyclists. But I contend that on a wet and windy Wednesday in February, when you're asking people to go home on a bike at 4 o'clock and it's dark, it's not going to be necessarily seen as the greatest thing in the world to do. Now, I may sound flippant in making that point, but there is a serious point behind it, because cities, not just ours, are about to embark on a multi-million-pound investment into cycle lanes. And I've got this awful feeling that in a couple of years' time, they're going to be seen as white elephants. But that might be me. And that might just be me being a very traditional motorist who doesn't really want to get out of his car. So I'd be interested to get people's views on that. And I'm not throwing you under the bus, forgive the pun, Melanie, but I know that you've been sat there patiently. I just wonder, in terms of getting in, out and around town, what your preferred mode of transport is.
Sorry, so you're asking me, is that correct?
Yeah, I just wondered what you thought about, you know, transport going forward, whether you're more likely to jump on a bus or get a bike or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I actually agree with what you're saying. I think we've obviously been blessed with amazing weather, so it's a great idea. I'm actually based in Rill right now, so sunny Rill, and that's a lovely idea. But I can imagine, you know, in the city, I actually just got back from Chicago, you know, living there for a few years, and I can imagine in the city that's just not going to work. You know, and I can imagine that, you know, the amount of investment, you know, to take, you know, and narrow the roads. I mean, you know, I can imagine traffic in Liverpool's already horrendous, and then you're sort of narrowing the roads, and I just can't see that working, especially in big cities.
I think it's going to be difficult. I know that Bill is keen to get some more road closures in Liverpool, so no doubt we're going to be having a battle in the future on that. But the other positive point, though, Bill, is that where you've got pedestrianisation, as you say, certainly in this shorter period of time at least, we will be able to get our restaurateurs back in business quickly, won't we?
Yeah, I think it's key. And don't forget, we've got to have a mature conversation about our cities. Liverpool has committed to being carbon zero by 2030, which is 10 years' time. Fossil fuel is dying out, so we need to be moving away from the fact that everybody sits in their own car in queues. We know all of that. And I must admit, I'm probably one of the last to get out of a car, but mine's been sat there for 3 months. I haven't filled up since March. I've used half a tank of diesel, and it's apparently it's a pound a litre at the moment, is it? I wouldn't have a clue, and you know, I haven't really missed it. And what we need to do is a proper conversation about public transport and getting our proper. Wouldn't it be great to have a tram from the south end of the city into town? But our city centre needs traffic shifting out of it, because it is actually a walkable city centre. So you can walk from the top of Old Hall Street by the Razzosin to the Baltic in 15 minutes. If you put your mind to it, quick walk through Liverpool, and you can do it. So we need to be having those serious conversations, and perhaps downtown's the organisation to lead it, Frank. You can lead it by example, so leave your gas guzzler behind, get the electric scooter out.
It won't be what you and Joe Anderson want to hear at the moment, I'm afraid. As a listener, a 15-minute walk in the middle of June is great.
It's even good in winter, Frank. You need to get exercise.
A 15-minute walk in the middle of bloody January when it's pissing down is an entirely different thing.
We need to get the city healthy, Frank.
Yeah, you need to get some reinforced umbrellas for the wind that whirls around Liverpool as well.
One of the things you were born with a waterproof skin. Not that I'm suggesting you take your clothes off and run around town, Frank.
No, well, 15 minutes is really quick. You must have good rollerblades, Bill.
No, so I could just. Why do you can just walk?
No high heels.
Yeah, definitely no high heels.
You can't do it in high heels, Bill.
Oh well, sorry about that.
Yeah, well, Bill knows that, but I think I think you know there is going to be a big debate going forward on the
massive debate, Frank, and that's the type of conversations we need as a city. Because what is the city going to look like in 20 years, 30 years time?
And you know, if we did have a modern tram as they have in that city down the road, then it might be an easier discussion to have. But yeah,
they've got a modern tram in every city apart from Liverpool.
Yeah, Leeds haven't.
Nottingham.
Yeah. Nottingham, Birmingham have now.
But that's what we need, modern transport.
Are there any other questions before we start to wrap today's session up, or any other points that any of the panelists or anyone else, in fact, want to make today? Have we stunned you all into silence?
I'm thinking.
I suppose just as a piece of information, and I know we're not here to sell ourselves, but I have got a good news story to end on. We've recently, whilst we've had to make redundancies on one side of the business, we've actually taken on 7 new staff on the other side, and are just about to take on another 7 new staff.
Right.
So and we support businesses with funding, so with R&D credits. And during this period alone, we've got back about £3 million for businesses on R&D. So there is a positive, and you know, whilst we've got the other side where unfortunately we're having to make redundancies, there is a positive where we're helping businesses in the other side.
It's excellent.
And I think there's been a lot of stories, haven't there? I'm sure we've all come across them, where businesses have adapted, been a bit more flexible, started to deliver different products. And that's going to see them through in the future. And equally, you know, an awful lot of business failures that happen over the next few months are going to be put down, of course, to COVID-19. But we're all aware of the fact that there were businesses struggling prior to the lockdown, and it's just simply going to be used, I suppose, for everyone now as the excuse, well, my business couldn't cope with it. Hopefully, most of them will get through. As I say, my biggest concern, and I know it's the city's biggest concern, is that hospitality sector, the visitor economy. That's just going to be so important to try and get back to some sort of normality as quickly as possible. And again, I think Denise used the phrase supply chain. You can imagine, Denise, can't you, the number of people that are employed directly or indirectly by those big restaurants, hotels, in services such as legal, but also outsourced to HR, and then you've got PR companies and agencies such as James's who do an awful lot of work for that. So really important that we do our bit to get that sector back up and running.